In today's episode, I'm with Eric Rubottom, principal at RTM Engineering Consultants. We're cutting through the buzz around sustainability and talking about the nuts and bolts of electrifying luxury hotels, especially those perched in rural, high-altitude locations. We get real about capacity limits from utilities, the guest experience line you can't cross, why solar and wind often can't carry the load, and why early commitment and integrated teams are essential. If you've ever wondered what it actually takes to deliver a 5-star experience with a smaller carbon footprint, this episode is for you. I'm Catherine Jelinek, your host for Beyond Engineering, a podcast from RTM Engineering Consultants, where a genuine devotion to people and their passions empowers us to grow together, lead with integrity, and make a meaningful impact. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited for this episode, again with Eric Rubottom, principal of RTM Engineering Consultants. So today we're talking about the topic of sustainability and specifically the challenge of electrification in the use of like a hotel design and build. And Eric has a lot of experience around this, and obviously the topic of sustainability is something that is thrown around and pretty commonplace these days and comes off pretty sexy, but we're going to talk about the reality of how this actually gets done in a project and how teams can be set up to achieve it successfully more often than not. And that comes down to things that aren't always so sexy. So Eric, to just start us off, can you tell us in plain terms, what is electrification? What is the problem around it really trying to solve, especially for those of us who aren't dialed in engineers?
Sure, absolutely. So let's actually take one quick step back and just talk about sustainability in general, because that means a whole lot of different things at the end of the day. To sum it all up, it's creating a built environment that is just that, sustainable. It's something that that can continue to be used, continue to be built, those sort of things, given the ever-changing landscape of resources, of materials, of energy, things like that. And where we get to electrification is actually kind of looking at a specific topic in sustainability, analyzing your carbon footprint. How much of what you're doing, whether it's process oriented or construction based or whatever, is impacting the carbon levels in our atmosphere, on our planet. And the goal is to reduce those carbon dioxide levels, and a big aspect of that is really comes out of our energy usage. Most of our energy is still produced via fossil fuels. So you burn good old dinosaur juice, and it turns into our electricity that we use. Just to throw that out there, about 40% of the energy use in our domestic market comes from energy use associated with our buildings. So we're using all of that energy to heat, to cool, to light, to power our buildings. Focusing, so what electrification is it is trying to get away from those fossil fuel uses for energy production, and getting into purely electricity. So in a current building that we might be working on, or that we might have worked on in the past, you'd be looking at things like natural gas or propane, or those kinds of platforms for energy use in our buildings directly, or getting power from coal-fired power plants or natural gas-fired power plants and those sort of things. So the idea is if we can actually turn this all into electricity, or turn all of our energy usage into electricity, then we can actually start to get away from the direct use of fossil fuels in our building, and then also through some sort of renewable energy production, solar photovoltaics, wind turbines, things like that, we can actually find renewable ways of producing our electricity, so we don't have to rely on fossil fuels at the power generation source either. So the whole concept of electrification is actually it's to get away from using fossil fuels to generate our electricity or generate our energy that we use in buildings.
Would you consider electrification one of the most important, if not the most important, step towards keeping especially a large building more sustainable, or are there other factors that are just as large?
I think electrification is definitely a large step in that. I would say it's the next step in sustainability. If you look at the journey of sustainability in construction, energy efficiency in our building is something that was really the first thing. How do we make our buildings more efficient? We have to heat them less. We have to cool them less. From a lighting perspective, using daylighting, we can light them less. And things like that. So that was kind of that first step, and then the next step is going to be, okay, what when we do need energy, where does that come from? How do we create that? How do we generate that? So I think it is a very big topic. It is a very big pursuit when we talk about sustainability from construction or from internal processes. But a lot of that actually comes from the processes that we're talking about inside of a building. How is that building being used? What are the expectations inside that building? So while it is a very large topic that is now the next logical step, it is still very much rooted in that energy efficiency side of things. Because in order to make electrification more viable for our projects, we still have to look at how do we reduce our energy usage? How do we make those buildings more efficient?
So let's talk about that, because that's kind of a challenging topic, the idea of reducing, heat or the use of lights or things like that when we're talking about really high-end hotels in unique locations. I mean, if I'm a person going to that hotel as a guest, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to take a hot bath. So I mean, you can't enforce that kind of behavior on guests, and these are really large buildings that need energy at a large scale. So let's talk about electrification in terms of these unique projects, these mountain resorts, sometimes in very rural areas, and what are the unique challenges to them?
Sure. There's the topic of a large hospitality, probably a big hotel or something like that. Electrification on its own can be a challenge just because of the sheer scale of the energy use of the building. When you're talking about electrifying your home, the scale of that is not very large. You can pretty easily just swap it from, if you have the right equipment and that sort of thing, you can pretty easily just swap it from like natural gas or propane over to electricity in most cases, and you're done from an electrification standpoint. The scale also impacts how you might be supplying that electricity on a smaller project like that. So, for what we use in our homes, you can probably, put solar panels on your roof. And offset a lot of your energy production. I'm sure all of us have heard stories about folks that put solar panels on their roof in a solar positive climate, a solar positive location, that actually end up selling more energy back to the grid, back to their utility company than they use in a particular year. So it's a net positive for them at the end of the day from a financial perspective. When you start looking at hospitality projects, now you're talking about something that's of such large scale that just the sheer possibility of going one-to-one swap from a BTU from natural gas to a watt for electricity may not be possible. Just the sheer scale of the electrical usage that's used on some of these larger resort properties might make that just impossible from the start. So you've got to look at how do we reduce our demands and that sort of thing. Also, when you think about some of these properties, a beachfront property or something like that, a large resort. I'm sitting here looking at a picture of the Ritz-Carlton Kapalua as my background on my computer right now.
Nice.
And that reminds me of working on that project. And you know what? There was a lot of space on that site to be able to put to put solar panels or something like that to help offset. When we start working on some of these larger properties in the mountains, like my team currently does, the sites are actually much more constrained in a lot of cases. So you're limited by the amount of space to be able to find locations to put solar panels on roofs. Even if you could, the electrical demands on some of these high altitude properties they actually exceed what you might see in a beachfront property or that sort of thing, because you're in a heating dominated climate. Yes. First of all, which is it's just a little bit more energy challenging to deal with. Then you oftentimes have a lot of additional amenity or expectations of amenity in some of these spaces. You think about, again, I'm looking at Ritz-Carlton Kapalua here. You don't need to heat a pool in an outdoor pool in Hawaii. You probably do need to heat your outdoor pool in Aspen. You're going to have outdoor hot tubs that you're going to have to deal with. We send a lot of energy into the atmosphere by melting snow off of sidewalks. So a lot of these properties, for safety reasons and for maintenance reasons, have pretty substantial snowmelt systems that we also have to account for from a heating standpoint. A lot of the spas that we work on, the spa facilities and that sort of thing, are going to have big saunas and big steam generators and those sorts of things that, again, just sucking up more electricity, more energy usage. And then you get into the luxury condominiums that might be incorporated into some of these properties. They're going to have steam generators or that sort of thing, steam showers in their showers, in those residential bathrooms and whatnot. And that's not to talk about, or that's just talking about things that are in addition to what you would typically see in a hotel. Your restaurants, your laundry facilities, everything like that also are going to be sucking up a lot of that energy. So in these high altitude properties, you're kind of caught in this double whammy where you have an increased amount of electrical usage compared to what I will say a baseline resort property would have, combined with the fact that, and you used this word earlier, a rural setting. So a lot of these locations, they might sound like they're that they're very cosmopolitan. Aspen, Jackson Hole, Telluride, Lake Tahoe, Big Sky, Montana, places like that. They sound very cosmopolitan. They sound like they have a lot of amenity, a lot of infrastructure, everything like that. The reality is these are tiny little mountain towns in the middle of nowhere. So as we're sitting here on this with these projects, we're exponentially increasing the amount of electricity usage to electrify one of these buildings. Simultaneously, we're doing that in an environment with a utility company that may not be able to support that extra electrical usage. And we've run into that on a number of different projects where, we've got to figure out a different way to do this because the utility just simply can't provide the power that we're looking for.
Right, because there's a huge difference for you in Colorado if you're doing this kind of luxury hotel concept outside of Denver or outside of Aspen, mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so I feel like we've just told everyone, scared them off doing this ever.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge pain, like an impossible headache. What are the actual steps, to even begin to approach it appropriately?
It really comes down to an integrated approach from all the stakeholders, everybody involved. And it's something that you got to start figuring out really early in your project. What are we trying to accomplish? Is this something that we either want to pursue or we need to pursue? So everybody's involved in the decision-making process. And everybody's involved and knowledgeable about the constraints that we're going to be dealing with on a particular project.
Follow-up question: who is everybody in this kind of project?
Man, when I say everybody, it's literally everybody involved on a construction project. So your design team is obvious, right? Your architect, your consultants like us, or whoever it might be. It can even be, your food service consultants, because again, we're talking about specifying, an electric-based fryer or an electric-based oven as opposed to gas. So these decisions are affecting everybody from a design perspective. It's also going to be including the building owner, the building developer, who's writing the check for this at the end of the day. They need to be involved in that decision-making process, and there needs to be a commitment to it up front, because the later you go in the design process, and want to then change direction, the more costly, the more inefficient, or might even just take the possibility off the table. So it's going to involve folks like that. It's going to involve your local jurisdictions. It's going to involve your local building department, because you might be working in a jurisdiction that is dictating this. We work in a number of different municipalities that they've come out and said new construction is going to be fully electrified, or at the very least electric ready, which means that you might be bringing natural gas or something like that to the building, but it needs to be ready to be swapped over, which
it's kind of
we
standard,
can get
right?
into that later if we want to.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's really a good idea, or if that's just kicking the can down the road and spending more money because of it.
All right.
But they need to be involved because they need to know this project's coming down the pipeline, and they need to know that they need to know the scale of what we're talking about, so we can have an open and honest conversation about, is this even possible? Because a lot of those jurisdictions, a lot of those local municipalities and that sort of thing, they are still a little bit naive about what some of this means too, when they say everything's going to be electrified. Because it's, again, going back to the analogy or the reference to like your house, it's really easy to say your new house is going to be electrified. That's an easy thing to knock off. It's a total different story to say this new hotel that's 175,000 square feet and 200, 300 keys is going to be electrified. That's a way bigger issue. And then you factor in also into the fact that it's like, you're probably not the only project going on like this. So there are other projects that are also going to be vying for that electricity, that capacity. So that your local municipalities, your local utility providers, folks like that also need to be involved from that process. Further,
yes.
Further, you need to get your, like, if you're anticipating on branding a hotel, flagging a hotel with a particular brand, a particular a particular tranche of quality.
Do you mean waving the flag about the sustainability of the hotel, or?
So most hotel brands at this point are actually leaning into the sustainability side of things.
Yes.
Okay? Most of them are actually seeing it as a differentiator, and frankly, they're all using it as a differentiator to the point where it's not differentiating anymore.
Right, which is why we're having this conversation,
right.
like what it actually takes to look like that. Yeah.
Right. So most of them are leaning into this, but their brand standards, what they're expecting for systems or for amenity or for program or that sort of thing in their properties, may need to be tweaked in order to make this particular thing possible. So, for instance,
what is tweaking? Yes, what would it look like?
So it could come down to something as wide ranging as HVAC system selection. Okay, if there's different HVAC solutions for a large resort property like this, and those solutions are going to have varying degrees of energy efficiency. So in order to achieve an honest and achievable electrification strategy, we may need to select a system that we need the energy efficiency, but it might not be a preferred system by that brand for various reasons.
Sure.
It might be a system that could be difficult to maintain in that particular environment, just because, again, going back to the rural nature of it, do you have people that are capable of actually building this, and then do you have people that are capable of maintaining it? So those are aspects of it. So it could be as wide ranging as system selection. It could start to get as philosophical as program, like going back to, hey, your brand standards might require snowmelt on your sidewalks. We might not do that. You might be hiring people with shovels to clear snow in order to make sure that you can achieve your electrification. It might be looking at different ways of controlling systems in guest rooms or in public areas or that sort of thing. That could. Are they good ideas to tweak to change the control strategies to make things more energy efficient? Yes, but that might not align with those brand standards. It might not align with guest expectation. Is there a potential that we start bleeding into guest expectation, and trying to figure out where is that line to make sure that we don't cross it?
Yeah, I can see how it's pretty easy that the needs for luxury and the needs for sustainability could easily be, at odds, to say the least.
Yeah,
and make this challenging.
It's really interesting because, it's what we've found in the luxury environment is don't reduce the guest experience. Like whatever you do,
because they're paying the bills, right?
You cannot affect the guest experience. I mean, we're working on properties where they're talking seriously between $10,000 and $15,000 a night to stay in this one particular property that we're working on. That's an environment you do not get to affect the guest experience. The guest experience is paramount. So if that's the case, then you have to know how far you can go to that point. And despite what they might say, despite however you market this, or say, you know what, we have an ultra sustainable product and this and that and the other, if you affect that experience, you're missing the mark.
You continue to properly scare me on behalf of the hotel owners and managers. So you talked about how to actually get this practically done and potentially possible. Really starts with knowing the goal up front and having that communicated to all parties. That seems so simplistic to be neat. It seems so obvious and simple. Why is that such a key point? It's so basic. Is it usually not done? Is it usually something that's second, third layer thinking?
It's really hard to tell why it might not be as effective or as achievable, as smooth as it could be. I think a lot of it boils down to just communication up front. A lot of it boils down to decision making up front. We're working on one project where they came in while the building was being built and asked if we could all of a sudden get this thing LEED certified. It's like, guys, that was something we should have talked about 24 months ago, 36 months ago. Can you do it at that point? Maybe, but it's going to cost you a lot of money to do it. It's definitely not something that you can just integrate into the process at this point. So I think a lot of the challenge comes to, have we even have the people that make decisions, the owner, the developer, whoever who is building this building and why are they building it? Have they made those decisions? And if not, why? And I think that's one part of it, is just have we made the decisions? Second, those decisions may have been made and are not being clearly articulated. And until, I'm going to say until this particular topic became more commonplace, no one was asking that question. So now that this topic is more commonplace, people are more, we're all in a better place to be able to ask that question up front. Let's see if this is something that we're trying to do. There's other times where, it's just for whatever reason, you might not get involved soon enough or as early as you would like to make that decision easier to make, or make those or be able to guide the design direction down that particular path more easily. So there's a lot of factors that come into play here. It does sound really simple to just sit there and say, hey, let's just talk about this to begin with. But the reality is that there's a lot of reasons why it's usually not a topic, or it may not be a topic before we ever start putting pencil to paper.
Yes. And when I hear you say decision making, what I'm really hearing is commitment. Like, to what degree are they going to commit to the sustainability of the project?
That's a big part of it. That's a big
part
of it.
Over the luxury element or the guest experience. And I can see how even when you might commit in one moment, there's going to be thousands of other little moments that are going to check that decision and force you to make it again. In how this system runs and how you plan the programming and what you're choosing for this and snowmelt and how many ways. And I can see how it's not just like one or the other. It's the different, it's the gradient of like how true is this. So I can imagine it's difficult to know when you see a hotel branded as sustainable, how real or how deep that goes in. Of course, there's different certifications and things like that, but.
And there's a lot that hotels do from sustainability besides the infrastructure that's installed. You know, we can sit here and talk about electrification, or we can talk about gray water reuse and that sort of thing on a property, or there's a whole lot of infrastructure things. But then there's also basic processes, basic hotel processes that and operations that very heavily weigh into how sustainable a property is. How often they do their laundry. I'm sure we've all stayed in a hotel that has the little tag that you hang out and says, no, you don't have to. You don't have to wash my towels, or hang them up on the hook, or leave them on the floor, whether you want them washed or anything like that. All of that stuff comes out of the idea that sustainability is more than just infrastructure; it's also operations, and how can we make the operation of this facility more sustainable. I want to go back to one thing you said, because you interpreted that correctly. It's commitment. Decision that when we're talking about decision making, it's commitment to the goal, commitment to achieving the goal. And the reason why I think that's an important topic, there's two specific reasons I think that's an important topic from a commitment standpoint. One is whether people want to hear this or not, there is a cost associated with going down this path. There is a financial cost, because the reality is if you keep everything the same and just swap a BTU of gas for a watt of electricity, it is tremendously more expensive to do an electrified building. So you have to start looking at alternative solutions that start to bring that cost down, as opposed to just swapping energy source. So that gets into that design process. So there is a financial commitment that needs to be made to go down this path. And the earlier you can make that commitment, the less that financial impact is felt.
Because then you plan around it more effectively.
Correct. Okay. Which gets into the second aspect, which is philosophy. You have to commit to the philosophy that this is guiding this future decision making. So down that road, when we can say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this from an electrification. The goal is to have a fully electrified building. Down the road, when we start talking about how much of the landscape is snow melted or not, if at all, what appliances are we putting in the kitchen? All of these decisions down the road have to be made in alignment with that philosophy, or you're going to make it more expensive, or even bring into the arena we're going to lose the ability to do this.
Alignment is key. Yeah. That commitment is made, but then that alignment in each small decision. I can see that. And, when you were talking about the financial side of the BTU versus the watt and the significant difference, but then it sounds like there's the planning and how you are able to then use the energy. Is that what I was hearing? And how to structure things so that there's maybe a lower or reduced energy consumption in the way that everything gets designed. Is that what you're
and there's really it really boils down to that. There's how efficient are we in using the energy that we're using, and how efficient how efficient the equipment is, what equipment we put in, that sort of thing. But then it goes back to just the raw cost of if we can plan ahead and go down a completely different path from a system perspective, it's going to make this way easier.
Yes. Okay, that has been fully painted. I see that more clearly. So talk a little bit about things like solar and wind, real renewable energy, and why is that not necessarily something that can be leaned on for these remarkable luxury rural hotel designs?
Sure. So it's challenging because of the spatial constraints that we have on a lot of these projects. A lot of these mountain resort projects and everything like that. Do they have roofs we can put PV on? Absolutely, we can put PV on that roof. There's a maintenance aspect with that, because PV does not work if it's more than 30% covered by snow. So you may be putting them in places where you've got to have maintenance people go up and knock snow off of them in order to make sure that it works. But even if that wasn't an issue, there's other aspects that could limit the effectiveness of PV. Shadowing from the mountains. If you're in a steep area that gets shadowed by trees, or it gets shadowed by the mountain itself, or whatever it might be, that can limit the effectiveness of those PV panels. And then just the sheer scale of the amount of roof that we have available for photovoltaics versus the amount of electricity that this building is using. To be honest with you, some projects that we work on, the PV that we could put on the roof, if we could put it on every south-facing aspect roof on the building, it would still be attacking a tank with a toothpick, as far as the amount of energy, the amount of electricity the building uses versus the amount of electricity that system would create. Could you? I could keep going on and on about PV, and frankly, some of the decisions about that, as ridiculous as it sounds, you talk about a hotel that's ski in, ski out. They don't want to, like the architect, the developer, whoever it might be, from an aesthetic perspective, may not want to see that on the roof, because the roof is seen by every person that comes skiing down that run, or that sort of thing. So it paints a little bit different picture than they're wanting to have from an aesthetic standpoint. Wind turbines, again, they take space. You could have vertical ones that could generate again a little bit of electricity for your building. They would have to be integrated in somehow architecturally, which often doesn't jive very well with traditional mountain architecture. The sloped roof Bavarian, we've all seen it. Certain wind turbines, are not going to work with that. And the space to do something of a large scale from a wind turbine perspective, just the space doesn't exist. So there's just for spatial constraints, there really isn't a lot of locations to be able to do that. There's some other challenges with some other renewable energy type systems. One that doesn't really have anything to do with electricity necessarily. One that comes to mind is geothermal. Using geothermal systems as a heat source or a heat sink for your HVAC system. It's a great idea. It's a really advantageous way to be able to introduce energy efficiency, to maximize that energy efficiency in your building. A lot of times we're building these things on the side of the mountain that you either have a level of rock that you just cannot penetrate to be able to get those geothermal loops in the ground to be able to support your building. Or even if you can, just the nature of the terrain, the nature of the construction, everything like that is so cost prohibitive that you see the price tag for it, and you find a different way.
Things like, and I've heard you say this throughout our conversation, but things like committing to snow shoveling rather than snowmelt are, I'm hearing, in the end, potentially more effective than trying to imagine anything with the flashier options of like solar, wind, geothermal.
Yep.
It
really boils down to because you have such a limited availability for on-site power production, for on-site energy production. You really have to spend a lot more time focusing on how do we reduce the energy of this building, and that goes beyond just, hey, we have more insulation in the walls, or we have a more energy efficient HVAC system. It really needs to start getting into program and starts to get into operations and things like that, because if you don't have to turn a system on, that's more efficient than having a system that operates at a higher efficiency.
So moving into our conclusion, more or less, is what would your honest recommendations be to a client who wants to consider this? Like, what questions do they need to be asking? What does possible? Okay,
because it sounds like I've spent the last half hour doing nothing but talking about how you can't do this, right?
Yeah, yes, and you've also talked about what really is important to begin with. But still, if you were to meet a client who's considering this, what questions do they need to be asking? What do they need to be thinking about first?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, it's still a great idea. I think it's still absolutely the direction that things need to go, larger scale from a construction standpoint, but across the globe, not just specifically for these types of projects. You could make an argument that it's worth your time to try even harder on this kind of a project, because At the end of the day, something like these big hospitality projects that we're working on in ski country are their recreation, their luxuries. They're not luxury like luxury, but they're luxuries like you don't have to have these. These are like, they're not necessary. These are elective. So the more energy efficient and the more focused on sustainability we can make these properties, honestly, from my opinion, the better off we all are. So it's absolutely something that we should be pursuing. It's a goal that we should be pursuing to achieve on every single one of these projects. I think just committing to it early, like you've got to come in and say, this is something we want to do on this project. How are we going to do it? And how are we going to do it is going to take a lot of input from a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different people associated with the overall project, from the design team to the construction team to local jurisdictions, everybody like that. How are we going to do this? Because it's not just hey, we're going to put in this more efficient HVAC system and put some additional insulation in the walls and we're going to make this happen. There's a lot more moving parts than that. So, from that perspective, it's, the questions to ask is one, how do we do this? But then also coming into it with the realization of like, this is something you have to commit to. It's probably going to cost you more than a baseline building if we were just pulling natural gas to it and just, status quo as far as how we would typically approach something like this. So it's, kind of come into it with that commitment and that alignment with to making it happen, as opposed to just, hey, is this something we can market?
It sounds like they're going to have tenacity in addition to commitment, because as they go around and ask all of the people they need to ask, how are we going to do this? How can we make this possible? They're going to hear a lot of what we heard from you today. The list of impossibilities, right? The list of why this is extremely challenging, given the location, given the utilities, given the needs of the resort facility. So I think it sounds like tenacity and optimism potentially, and just continuing to ask that, how can we make this possible, to each of these different the people who need to be at the table. So and then in the end, what does success actually look like? Like, what's a realistic picture of one of these hotels? Like, either a project that you have worked on or a project that you are working on, and that makes some sort of measurable difference towards sustainability.
Sure. At the end of the day, success is achieving the goal. Can we make this thing completely electrified? And without, going back to what I said before, without affecting the guest experience. How can the guest experience be maintained while still achieving this goal? Is it possible? Absolutely. Every single one of the projects that we've worked on has had challenges with it. To be 100% honest with you, a lot of the issues that we run into is capacity. Going back to the rural nature of these projects, they just can't supply the electricity that we need, even at a reduced electricity consumption or that sort of thing. So some of the plans for electrification on some of these projects have kind of gone on the back burner because the utility just can't provide it. So that's a particular case where we might design around an electric-ready building, so that when the capacity can actually catch up, then that change can be made down the road. So that's ultimately success for us on something like this. Is have we either achieved the goal, or have we set ourselves up so that goal can be achieved in the future after we're done with the project?
Yeah, so even if it can't be achieved, at least being able to set it up for that, that's good. Last general questions. What makes RTM different when approaching a project like this? And what should they be watching out for with other firms? Are there things that are said or promised, but sometimes these are indicators that this isn't necessarily possible? Like, what do they need to be watching out for when they are choosing a firm? And what do you know that from your experiences that makes RTM any different?
I think one of the things that we bring to the table is a lot of the stuff that I talked about today, knowing the pitfalls, knowing the hurdles that you're going to have to get over.
Just talking about all the awful things Up front, at least, right?
If I don't work on these kind of projects, and I don't work in these kind of municipalities, and I don't work in these kind of locales, and know the challenges and the specific nuance and unique aspects of these particular types of hospitality resorts and things like that, if I'm not familiar with that kind of stuff, then I can say a lot of things that may never get off the table because they might have been easy where I was working. That's the thing that we bring to the table is just the knowledge about how the knowledge about the hurdles that we're going to have to clear here. I would be cautious about someone that comes in and so easily says, "Oh yeah, we'll be able to achieve that." Because that's making a lot of assumptions that may be erroneous at the end of the day. So, I think that's one thing that our team has with experience on these high end high altitude properties is, man, we know what goes into these projects, and it can be a challenge for everybody involved if you don't have a lot of experience on this type of project.
What I heard is that it's really important to choose a firm that has experience in the actual physical landscape that they're dealing with. So if they're building this luxury resort in Ohio, not that they are, we're talking about Colorado, to find somebody who knows that area. And with you guys, obviously, understanding the nuances of cliffside resorts in rural areas, which is really cool, very unique. But I love that, and this is my closing appreciation for you and your team, Eric, is you love projects, you love the impossible. You kind of just thrive on trying to figure out how to learn more about what can't be done, and you see that as a good thing because it's informing you, and from there you can walk forward clearly. So I love that. When there's somebody who really likes to understand everything that's going wrong, it's kind of an indicator of a craftsman, to really get the scope of things, not lie to themselves or others, and then go from there optimistically but realistically.
Yeah, I think that we're not magicians. We can't make things disappear. We can't make them and we can't make them not use energy. We can't make energy just appear out of nowhere, like all these things. There's some pragmatic ties to everything that we're talking about. And yeah, I think that's something that our team brings to the table is we've done this, and we're always learning. There's always new energy codes coming out that we're having to find ways to meet. We're always every single project we work on, everybody involved on that project will learn something that they'll take away and be able to apply on the next project. You won't ever hear us say that something is completely impossible. We might echo if someone else says it. But it's we're always on the lookout to learn and find ways of making things possible, but also eyes wide open to knowing the challenges to making that happen.
I so appreciate your pragmatic approach and the nitty-gritty honesty of this conversation. And I think it's a great way of showcasing the excellence. And I know that that's one of the core values at RTM is excellence in engineering, and it just shows in this conversation in terms of how thorough you are in checking through each of those decision points. You've obviously guided teams through this before, and it's really cool to see. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Eric, and for talking us through this complex, very interesting, very challenging, but worthwhile subset of project. And everybody listening, I hope you learned something from this, especially in terms of the eyes wide open nature of true sustainability and our need to commit to that, especially in the realm of engineering, construction, architecture, design. So again, thank you, Eric, for all of this.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Till next time, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Engineering, a podcast from RTM Engineering Consultants. To be notified of future episodes and to watch past episodes, please follow Beyond Engineering on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Until next time.